The auctioneer at the Hardwick Small Ruminant and Livestock Sale called him Lot 19 and couldn't get a bid above $400. That should tell you something. A 4-year-old Hereford bull with clean papers and no health issues selling for $400 in a market where average breeding bulls moved between $2,500 and $4,000. Something was wrong with Lot 19. And everybody in the barn knew it except the one person who ended up buying him. Grace Hollowell didn't know cattle the way the men in those bleachers knew cattle. She'd been married to a dairyman for 16 years, but her job had been the books, the milk checks, the feed invoices, the tax filings. When Darren left in 2021 and signed the 60-acre property over because he wanted out more than he wanted equity, Grace was left with a farm, a basic understanding of how it worked, and nobody to ask when things went wrong. She'd sold the dairy cows within 6 months, couldn't manage the milking schedule alone, replaced them with 8 beef cows she bought from a neighbor who was downsizing. Hereford Angus crosses, easy keepers, the kind of cattle that survive on grass and don't need much handling. Simple, low maintenance. The plan was to run a cow-calf operation, sell calves at Weaning in the fall, and use the income to cover the mortgage. The plan needed a bull. Grace had a budget of $3,000. She'd been watching auction prices for weeks and knew what a decent herd sire cost in the Hardwick market. She showed up that Saturday with her checkbook and a list of lots she'd pre-screened from the catalog. Lot 19 wasn't on her list. She noticed him before the sale started, walking through the barn to look at the animals. He was in the far pen. A red and white Hereford, solid build, decent muscling, nothing physically wrong that Grace could see. But his pen was the only one where nobody was standing. Every other lot had 2 or 3 buyers leaning on the rail, evaluating. Lot 19 had empty space around him like a quarantine zone. Grace asked the man in the next pen, a rancher named Curtis Dion, who she recognized from the feed store. "What's wrong with that one?" Curtis glanced at the Hereford and smiled. "Nothing's wrong with him. He's healthy, fertile. His breeding soundness exam was clean. Curtis searched for the word. He doesn't act like a bull." "What does that mean?" "Means he won't push cows, won't establish dominance. The guy who consigned him ran him with 30 cows for a full breeding season and got a 40% conception rate. National average is around 60. The bull spent more time standing next to the cows than breeding them. He'd rather be near them than do his job. So he's lazy." Curtis shrugged. Lazy or gentle or broken, depending on who you ask. Either way, nobody here is going to pay bull price for an animal that won't breed efficiently. He'll sell for meat weight, maybe less. Grace looked at the bull again. He was standing at the pen rail closest to the aisle where people walked. Not pacing, not agitated, just standing there, watching people go by, his ears forward and his expression open, interested. Like every person who walked past was someone he wanted to meet. A girl, maybe 10 years old, stopped at his pen and stuck her hand through the rail. Her father grabbed her arm. "Don't touch him. He's a bull." The bull lowered his head and sniffed the girl's fingers, gently, the way a family dog greets a child. The girl giggled. Her father pulled her away. Grace watched that. When Lot 19 came through the ring and the bidding died at 400, Grace raised her hand. Not because she had a plan, because something about a bull that sniffed a child's fingers like a greeting instead of a threat felt like an animal that deserved better than meat weight. She named him Hank. Short for nothing. Just Hank. The first breeding season was a disaster. Grace turned Hank out with her 8 cows in June. Standard practice. Bull goes in with the cows, stays through August. Cows calve the following March. Simple math that has worked on American ranches for 200 years. Hank did not do the math. He walked into the pasture and immediately went to the nearest cow, stood beside her, grazed next to her, followed her to the water trough, followed her back. He moved through the herd like a new kid at school trying to make friends. Attentive, eager, slightly too close. The cows tolerated him the way cows tolerate anything that doesn't threaten their calves, but he wasn't breeding. Grace watched for a week. Hank showed no interest in the normal behaviors that indicate a bull is working. Chin resting, fleeman response, mounting attempts. He just hung around. She called Dr. Amy Rawlings, the large animal vet out of Morrisville. Amy came out, examined Hank, ran hormone panels, checked his reproductive tract again. He's fertile, Amy said. Testosterone levels are normal. Sperm motility is good. Physically, there's nothing stopping him from breeding. Then why isn't he? Amy watched Hank standing peacefully beside a cow named Birch, their heads almost touching as they grazed. Some bulls have what we call low libido. It's not a physical problem. It's behavioral. They have the equipment but not the drive. In commercial operations, they're culled immediately because efficiency matters. You need a bull that covers 30 cows in 60 days. This bull wants to be their companion, not their mate. Grace felt the $400 mistake settling into her stomach. What do I do? Amy thought about it. You could lease a bull from someone for breeding season. Keep Hank as, I don't know, a pet. Or you could give him more time. Some low libido bulls breed eventually. They just do it on their own schedule, not yours. Grace didn't have money to lease a bull, so she waited. By late July, Hank bred his first cow. Grace didn't see it happen. She just noticed the signs. The cow stopped cycling. Her behavior changed, the subtle indicators that cattlemen have read for centuries. 1 cow, out of 8. August, 2 more. September, 1 more. By the time Grace pulled Hank out of the pasture in October, 4 of 8 cows had settled, 50%. Below average, not great, but not zero. Grace did the math that winter. 4 calves in March, worth maybe $600 each at weaning. $2,400 total. Her annual mortgage payment was $14,000. The calves would cover about 17% of it. She was still losing. The calves arrived in March. All 4 born without assistance. Unheard of for a first calf season with a new bull. Grace checked them every 4 hours during calving week, setting alarms at night, driving out to the pasture in the dark. She never had to intervene once. The cows calved cleanly. The calves stood and nursed within an hour. No retained placentas. No dystocia. Amy came for the routine calf check and noted the easy births in her records. That's unusual. 4 for 4 unassisted with a Hereford bull on crossbred cows. His calves must be small-framed at birth. They were. The calves averaged 62 pounds at birth. Light for Hereford crosses, which typically run 70 to 80. But they were proportional. Not weak. Just compact. And then they grew. By 60 days, all 4 calves were above the breed average for adjusted weaning weight. By 90 days, they were in the top 20%. Small at birth, fast growth, easy delivery. The trifecta that every cow-calf producer wants but rarely gets from a single bull. Amy noticed something else. The calves' temperament. Grace, these are the calmest calves I've worked with this spring. They walked into the chute for vaccinations without balking. No kicking, no panic. Most calves at 60 days are wild. They fight the chute. They stress. They lose weight from handling. Yours walked through like they were in line at the feed store. Grace thought about Hank, about the way he stood beside his cows instead of pushing them, the way he'd sniffed a child's hand at the auction, the way Governor the barn cat sat on his back some mornings, and Hank just stood there like it was perfectly normal. His temperament was in the calves. At weaning in October, Grace loaded the 4 calves on a trailer and took them to the Hardwick sale. She expected $600 each, maybe $650 if the market was strong. The calves sold for $820 each. Curtis Dion found her after the sale. Those were the quietest calves that went through the ring today. 3 different buyers asked me who sired them. I told them it was that pet bull you bought for $400. They didn't believe me. Grace deposited $3,280, minus the $400 she'd paid for Hank. Net gain, $2,880 on a bull the entire market had written off. Not enough to save the farm, but enough to make Grace wonder what would happen with more cows. She bought 4 more cows that winter, used the calf money, brought her herd to 12. Turned Hank out the following June. His second season, Hank bred 7 of 12, 58%. Still below average, still slow. But the pattern held. Every calf born unassisted, every calf small at birth, every calf grew fast, Every calf had that quiet temperament that made them worth more at the sale barn. 7 calves at $800 average, $5,600. The third year, Grace had 16 cows. She'd reinvested everything. Hank bred 11. His conception rate was climbing, 69%. Still not elite. But the calves were now known in the Hardwick market. Buyers asked for them by name. Hollowell calves. The quiet ones. The ones that gained weight without drama and walked through a chute like they were bored. 11 calves at $850 average, $93.50. By year 4, Grace made the mortgage payment in full for the first time since Darren left. She sat at the kitchen table with the receipt and the bank's confirmation letter and stared at both for a long time. Then she walked outside and found Hank standing near the barn where he always stood in the afternoons. Not doing anything useful by any commercial standard. Just being there. Present. The way he'd been present since the day she brought him home. Amy came out for spring vaccinations and asked Grace how the operation was going. "I'm in the black," Grace said. For the first time in 4 years. Amy looked at Hank, who was standing near the chute, calm as always, while calves filed past him without stress. "You know what he is, right? A bull who doesn't act like a bull." "No." Amy shook her head. "He's exactly what a bull is supposed to be. The industry just forgot. We spent 50 years breeding for aggression and high libido and maximum output. We got bulls that breed fast and produce calves that fight you at every handling. Hank breeds slow and produces calves that people want to buy. His efficiency isn't in his conception rate. It's in what comes out the other end. Grace has 22 cows now. Hank is 8. His conception rate last season was 71%. Still not what the catalogs call elite. Still not what the men at the Hardwick auction would choose if they were spending $3,000 on a bull. But Grace's calves top the sale every October. Buyers call her in August asking how many she'll have. She's had 2 ranchers offer to buy Hank, one for $5,000, one for $8,000. She said no to both. Curtis Dion brought his granddaughter to Grace's farm last fall. The girl was the same age as the one who'd stuck her hand through Hank's pen at the auction 4 years ago. Maybe the same girl. Grace wasn't sure. The granddaughter walked up to Hank in the pasture, stuck her hand out. Hank lowered his head and sniffed her fingers. The girl scratched his forehead. Hank closed his eyes. Curtis watched. Same man who'd told Grace the bull was lazy and broken and wouldn't breed efficiently. He didn't say anything for a while. Then, I was wrong about him. Grace didn't gloat, didn't need to. The bank statement did that for her. You weren't wrong. You were just measuring the wrong thing.